and Howard Stern, where he said he'd even vote for a wall over Trump. Harris replied, "I'm not a wall, but I am plastered." New York Times opinion piece says we should abandon the idea of masculinity. I'm way ahead of you.
Joe Rogan and Greg Gutfeld didn't just criticize Howard Stern, they broke him down, piece by piece, in a way that made everyone watching sit up and listen. It wasn't a typical rant or a quick joke, it was a full-blown takedown, a cultural moment that pulled no punches. They didn't scream, they didn't throw wild accusations. They simply held up a mirror, and what it reflected back was a version of Howard Stern that many people didn't recognize anymore. The once edgy, fearless radio icon had turned into something safe, controlled, and, in their view, painfully out of touch. It started with Joe Rogan making sharp comments about Stern's recent behavior. He didn't understand how the same guy, who used to make wild, controversial jokes on live radio, was now acting like a quiet, cautious voice of morality. Joe remembered Stern's early days when he was considered the king of all media. A title earned through raw honesty, boundary-pushing humor, and total disregard for what was considered acceptable. Now, Joe said Stern was more like a nervous dad at a PTA meeting than a fearless media giant. The man who once roasted everyone and everything now seemed scared to speak his mind. Rogan didn't hold back. He joked that Stern had turned into a recluse living in a beach mansion, calling basic tasks like eating out exhausting. Joe mocked how Stern could call walking to his tennis court or chatting at a wine tasting session stressful. According to Rogan, Stern's complaints felt ridiculous compared to real people dealing with real problems. He said it was like listening to someone cry about a broken nail while others were losing their homes. The conversation got deeper when Rogan started comparing the old Stern with the new. The old Stern, he said, was bold. He fought the FCC, he got fined. He pushed the boundaries of what could be said on public radio. He was raw, direct, and often offensive, but he stood for something. The new Stern, in contrast, spent more time lecturing people than entertaining them. According to Rogan, Stern had gone from being red-pilled to blue-pilled. He used to question the system. He sounded like a spokesperson for it. Greg Gutfeld entered the conversation with his own set of sharp observations. He described Howard Stern as a washed-up rock star who had traded leather jackets for soft sweaters and edgy jokes for safe opinions. Greg said Stern used to be like a wolf, wild, dangerous, and unpredictable, but now he was more like a poodle. Same fur, no bite. Stern, he said, had gone soft. He no longer made people uncomfortable. He made them yawn. What made the takedown so powerful was the way Rogan and Gutfeld used Stern's own history against him. They didn't invent anything. They didn't dig into private life scandals. They simply reminded people who Stern used to be on, who he had become. Rogan remembered when Stern used to bring on outrageous guests, create shocking moments, and speak his mind no matter who it offended. Now, Rogan said Stern only invited safe guests, the ones approved by his PR team. Instead of asking hard questions, he handed out compliments. Instead of fighting authority, he bowed to it. Added that Stern now seemed more interested in pleasing elites than challenging them. He lived in the Hamptons, rubbed elbows with celebrities, and preached to his audience like a schoolteacher. According to Greg, Stern didn't evolve. He gave up. He traded rebellion for respectability. He wanted to be liked more than he wanted to be honest. And in that process, he lost the thing that made him special. The conversation then turned to how Stern had handled political topics, especially his shift toward being aggressively anti-Trump and pro-mainstream narratives. Rogan found it funny how Stern, who had once mocked every president, every politician, and every power figure, without hesitation, now seemed afraid to offend anyone on the left. Rogan said it was strange to see Stern suddenly become so careful with his words. It didn't feel like the same guy. It felt like someone playing a part, an actor following a script written by publicists. Gutfeld, ever the comic with sharp timing, said that watching Stern now was like watching a magician who forgot how to do tricks. The old Stern was dangerous. The new one, he said, was doing balloon animals. Instead of shock, Stern gave lectures. Instead of laughs, he gave opinions that sounded copied from a social media post. And what made it worse was that he seemed proud of it. He wasn't trying to reclaim his edge. He was embracing his softness. Rogan then brought up a clip of Stern defending being woke. Stern had said that if being woke meant supporting vaccines, supporting transgender rights, and opposing Trump, then he was proudly woke. Rogan's response was simple but powerful. If you believe in science, why hide in a mansion? Why act like the world is still ending while others are trying to live normal lives? Joe wasn't attacking Stern's beliefs. He was calling out the contradictions. The same guy who used to mock hypocrites had, in his view, become one. Greg jumped back in and pointed out how Stern used to make jokes that were wild sometimes, tasteless, but always fearless. This was the guy who once made horrible jokes after tragedies and still found a way to defend free speech. Now, Stern was the one telling people what not to say. He had gone from challenging the rules to enforcing them. From rebel to referee. The takedown got even more intense when Rogan and Gutfeld started talking about how Stern handled humor today. Rogan said it felt like Stern forgot what it meant to be funny. He was so focused on being safe, polite, and correct that he had lost the ability to take a joke, let alone tell one. Stern, who used to be the loudest voice against censorship, was now someone who would call for people to be silenced if they said the wrong thing. Greg compared Stern to an aging rock star who didn't know when to hang up the mic. He said Stern was still trying to perform, but the fire was gone. The energy, the bite, the unpredictability, it was all missing. And what was left behind was a tired version of a legend who no longer scared the establishment, but sat at its table. As they continued, Rogan made a sad but sharp observation. He said he didn't hate Stern. In fact, he missed him. He missed the man who once didn't care what anyone thought. He missed the voice that stood up to power, questioned everything, and entertained millions by simply being honest. The real tragedy, according to Rogan, wasn't that Stern had changed. It was that Stern had forgotten who he was. They both agreed that the world didn't need more safe voices. It needed people who could speak the truth even when it hurt, especially when it hurt. Stern had once been that guy. Now he was just another celebrity with carefully crafted opinions, living in a bubble and afraid to pop it. More than anything was what made this takedown so emotional. It wasn't just a joke. It was a farewell to a legend who had chosen comfort over courage. Greg ended the segment with a final blow. He said that Howard Stern didn't get taken down by critics, by the government, or by a scandal. He got taken down by himself. He let fear win. He let fame soften him. And he let the image of what people thought he should be replace the reality of who he really was. In doing so, he didn't just lose fans. He lost his voice. Rogan nodded, quiet for a moment, and then said the line that stayed with everyone who watched. Howard doesn't fight the system anymore. He sends it holiday cards. The room went silent. That wasn't a joke. That was the truth. And it cut deeper than any roast ever could. They weren't trying to destroy Howard Stern's legacy. They were trying to save it. But first, they had to burn down the illusion. And in that moment, everyone watching knew this wasn't about hate. It was about disappointment. About watching someone who used to stand for freedom now stand for approval. About losing a hero to the same culture he once fought. The message was clear. Legends don't need to be perfect. They need to be real. And if Howard Stern ever wants to reclaim his voice, he'll need to start by remembering where he left it. Not in the mansion, not in the studio, but in the courage to be exactly who he was, loud, flawed, fearless, and free. And so the dissection continued, not with rage, but with brutal honesty. Joe Rogan leaned in again, this time not with sarcasm, but with sadness. He recalled how Stern once stood as the symbol of rebellion, a guy who made the uncomfortable normal, a man who stood up when the rest of the world wanted to stay quiet. Stern built his brand on challenging authority, not obeying it. Rogan reminded everyone that Stern was once fined millions, fought off government censorship, and refused to water down his show, no matter the cost. That man didn't ask for permission. He took the mic and made the rules. But now, that man was gone. Gutfeld, always ready with a comparison, jumped in to say that watching Stern now was like watching a tiger in a cage, pacing around, pretending it's still wild. Except the roar was gone. He said the man who once shocked America had become the kind of person who would write a letter to the editor. Not a ribald, just another celebrity playing it safe. And the worst part? He seemed to believe he was still the same. They both spoke about how Stern's show used to feel dangerous. You didn't know what would happen next. It was unpredictable, raw, and wild. That's why millions tuned in. It wasn't just entertainment, it was freedom. It's a kind of freedom that made you laugh, cringe, gasp, and maybe even think. But now, the show was polished, predictable, and protected. The danger was gone. The laughs had changed. The guests were chosen for image, not impact. Joe Rogan called it the ultimate irony. Stern, the man who once mocked every celebrity for being fake, had become one. He used to tear apart Hollywood phone, now he sipped cocktails with them. Used to call out fake outrage, now he participated in it. Used to attack cancel culture, now he played along with it. Rogan said it was like watching the guy who once burned the rule book, now reading from it on air, line by line. Greg Gutfeld didn't let up either. Said Stern didn't just lose his edge, he handed it over willingly. Fame, comfort, and fear had turned the lion into a lapdog. Not because he had to, but because he chose to. Greg painted the image clearly. Howard Stern, once a fierce voice against the machine, was now the machine's mascot. And not even the funny kind. They touched on how Stern now defended every cause that earned him applause from the media. Not because he believed in it deeply, but because it kept him out of trouble. Joe said it best. When your beliefs line up perfectly with your dinner guests, something's off. Stern wasn't the voice of the people anymore. He was the echo of the elite. But the real moment that hit hardest was when Rogan and Gutfeld asked, what would the old Stern think of the new one? Would he be proud? Would he laugh? Or would he roast him live on air, like he did everyone else who went soft? They both agreed the old Stern wouldn't just dislike the new one. He'd destroy him. Rogan brought up how Stern used to laugh at being called offensive, toxic, or dangerous. That was the point. That was the job. You don't become a legend by playing nice. You become a legend by saying what no one else has. The guts to say, and Stern had it. Till he didn't. And then came the topic of influence. Rogan reminded viewers that Stern wasn't just a guy with a radio show. He shaped culture. He opened doors for every podcast, every shock jock, every comic who wanted to say something real. Without him, a lot of people wouldn't have platforms. Today, that's why this fall hurt so much. It wasn't just a man changing, it was a giant stepping off the battlefield. Gutfeld followed that up with one of his most biting lines. Howard Stern used to be the question. Now he's the answer. On a multiple-choice test written by HR that drew a wave of laughter and nods because it summed up exactly what had happened. Stern had become safe, processed, predictable. They both admitted that change is natural. No one stays the same forever. People grow up, they mature. But there's a difference between growth and surrender. Growth keeps your fire alive. Surrender puts it out. Stern didn't grow up, he gave in. He didn't get wiser,